Hey y'all, welcome to JC Theater's channel. I'm not JC Theater, but he's letting me profile my favorite deck, Guru Control. So I've been playing this deck for about a year now, and it was the second deck I put together after coming back into the game. I've been having a lot of success with it up and through this current version. So Guru Control, obviously, is a control deck that focuses on outgrinding your opponent and keeping everything in a slow, simple game state. You do this through Guru's ability to book and moon your opponent's key combo pieces, more on that later, various negations, and one very powerful floodgate. The deck very much wants to go first, as one of the places Guru Control can struggle is with breaking a board, but if given time, it can slowly chip apart very powerful boards. So now, let's get into it. First up, for your monsters, we're playing 3 of the boy himself, Subterror Guru. This guy is the heart of the deck. On a flip effect, he can add any other Subterror card from your deck to your hand. Guru also has the ability to target a monster on the field, then flip himself and that target face down. The bonus for this is, if you have another face-up Subterror card on the field, you can do this on a quick effect. Your major play with this is going to be disrupting your opponent's combos via flipping key tuners or link materials face down. Next up, we've got triple Subterrafindus. Findus is very much the best card this deck has. She's an omni-negate hand trap that is generally going to be your first search off of Guru. She works like this. Your opponent activates a card or effect. You target one of your face-up Subterror monsters and negate that opponent's card effect. Then you flip the targeted Subterror face down. There's 2 important notes about this effect. First is, the negation happens first, then the targeted Subterror flips face down. This means that whatever your fiend is targeted does not have to remain on the field or face up for her negation to resolve. Secondly, she can use this negation effect while she is face up on the field. This one can catch a lot of players off guard who just assume she's only a hand trap. As if she wasn't already good enough, she has a second effect to target a face-up Subterror on your field, herself included, flip that target face down, and special summon another Subterror from either your hand or graveyard in either face-up or down defense position. Important to note, for the second effect, she does have to flip her target in order to get the summon. This effect is a solid way to get your Guru face down for not only an extra body on board, but also to get the flip effect search off the boy. Rounding out our Subterror lineup, we've got Subterror Nemesis Archer and Subterror Behemoth Umastrix. Archer is basically a giant rat for the deck. When she's destroyed by either battle or card effect, you can special summon a Subterror from your deck in either face-up or down defense position. Generally, you'll want to either get Guru or Umastrix, but if your opponent doesn't have any follow-up after popping your Archer, you can always go into a Findus and use the Findus to, at the very least, wall up by special summoning back your Archer on your next turn. Archer also has an effect that, as long as you have another Subterror monster on the field, if she attacks a face-down defense position monster, you can spin that card back into the deck. Super useful for if you want to keep an important combo piece out of your opponent's graveyard, or if Guru flips something big face down, Archer can just take care of it without going into damage calculations. Umastrix is a card I've seen some lists not use, but I like having the big boy around. He's a 2k attacker with 2700 defense and a flip effect to target one of your opponent's monsters and banish it. He has 2 other effects. The first is, if the last thing to happen on your previous chain is a monster flipping face down, you can special summon him from your hand in face-up defense position. For example, if your opponent activates an effect, you negate with Findus and flip a Guru face down. After that chain resolves, you can special summon this guy, since the last thing to happen was Findus flipping Guru face down. This effect can miss timing, however, if say there was another effect in there as Chain Link 1, since he is a when, not an if. Lastly, this guy can flip himself face down once per turn. Moving on to our hand traps, we play triple Cyphering Gear Gamma. Generally, you really want your Hidden City or whatever draw or search power you're using to get to the Hidden City to resolve, and dropping a Cyphering on an Ash, then having your Hidden City resolve is a really good way to start off your game. It also has some interesting synergy with a floodgate that we play that we'll get to later on. Obviously, we have the one driver in here as well, just to make the Gammas live. It's a brick, but Gamma makes it worth it. Next up, we have 2 copies of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. So this deck is a grind deck, and the bit of chip damage she provides, if you can get to hit with it, does help in the end. If you really don't vibe on her, you can play Effect Veiler or Ghost Ogre, but I prefer having a negate, and while it is restricted to only activating on the special summon of monster, it can come in clutch when effects go off outside of the range of Veiler. Now we're going to go into our spell and trap lineup. Our spells in this deck, with one exception, are field spells and cards to help get to said field spells. We're going to be opening this with 3 copies of Hidden City. So Hidden City, on activation, allows you to search for any Subterror monster and add it to your hand. Its second effect allows you to, once per turn, change one face-down defense position Subterror to either face-up defense or attack position. Important to note, this is not a summon, which will be important when we go into something in our extra deck. Its third effect allows you to, once per turn when your opponent declares an attack, flip a face-down Subterror monster to either face-up attack or defense position. Then you can negate the attack. Now a couple quick notes on this. First, your opponent doesn't have to be attacking a Subterror for this to go off, you just need to have one face-down to activate it. Secondly, you don't have to negate the attack. If you can boost your Subterror's attack, you can always flip it into face-up attack and let your opponent crash, but more on that when we get into our trap lineup. Next up, we play 1 Necro Valley and 1 Mystic Mine. Necro Valley is a blowout against a lot of decks, and if you can set up a nice protected Guru, you don't really need the attack negation provided by Hidden City. Plus, Subterror has a trap that allows you to play around your own Necro Valley as well, if need be. It's more beneficial for you playing this deck than it will be detrimental, even if you are losing the Fiendus summon from grave temporarily. Mystic Mine is essentially your oh shit button for this deck. We do play a Metaverse in here as well, mostly for this, but you can also generally stall out a turn if you set up with a Guru and a Mystic Mine, forcing your opponent to either eat a turn, use resources to out the mine, or just let the mine sit. And since we're playing 4 other field spells, it's very easy for us to turn off our own Mystic Mine. To help us see our field spells more often, we're playing 1 copy of Terraforming, for obvious reasons, and 1 copy of Set Rotation. Set Rotation works well in this deck, since we can always toss a Necro Valley to our opponent, or if we're in a real flexing position, toss them a Mystic Mine if you know you can negate it down the line. It's mostly in here as a means to first turn your Hidden City though, but it also does serve 2 other cool utilities as well. Firstly, it can shut off things like an opponent's Magical Meltdown and Search if you chain this to its activation, since their field spell will no longer be on the field to resolve properly. Secondly, this is a neat main deck add to our opponent's Mystic Mines, since you can just give them a new field spell over it. I do have to mention though, be careful using this as it locks you into whatever field spell you activate as long as the other field spell is set to the field. This can be great if your opponent needs their field spell, as they can't activate a new one over whatever you gave them if you leave yours set, but it also means that as long as they leave theirs set, whatever you use is all you get, even if yours leaves the field. Also, it has to put differently named field spells on either field. Generally not an issue because we run 3 different names, but if you find yourself siding out either Necro Valley or Mystic Mine, I recommend taking this out as well. We're going to follow all of that up with 3 Pot of Extravagance. Not much to say here beyond this is your main draw power, as you don't really use too much of your extra deck and banishing it away doesn't slow you down. We also run 2 Pot of Duality. It is important to mention that Pot of Duality does conflict with your side frames, since Duality locks you out of special summons for the turn, so just something to be aware of. Moving on to our last spell, we play 1 copy of Subterror Cave Clash. So I've seen a lot of lists not use this, and admittedly it can be bricky. Its effect is that all Subterrors on the field gain 500 attack and defense per every face-down monster on the field, both yours and your opponent's. The attack gain is cool, but just keep in mind that if you attack into a face-down monster at damage calculation, when that monster flips face up, you're going to lose the 500 additional attack you got from it. It can come in handy if you build a board of at least 3 monsters and want to get in some extra damage by using Guru to flip himself on another monster that's already attacked face down, leaving your third to gain a nice 1000 attack, but generally you're only going to be doing this to close out of a game. Its second effect is that once per turn when a Subterror hits for battle damage, you can get a Subterror card back from your graveyard to your hand. This is great in the long grind, as you can recycle Fienduses essentially forever. It does have a little bit of conflict with Necro Valley, but again we have a trap that gets around that. Its most important utility though is that it's a Subterror card that sticks around face up on the field to turn Guru's Book of Moon effect into a quick effect, allowing for that additional interruption on your opponent's turn. Also, in niche cases, with this, a Guru on the field, and a Fiendus in hand, you can activate Fiendus to negate an effect, then on a quick effect, chain Guru to flip something else face down, giving you essentially 2 separate interruptions, since, again, Fiendus doesn't actually have to flip a Subterror face down successfully to negate, she just has to have one to target. Now let's get into our trap lineup. First off, we have our previously mentioned Metaverse. just a quick note, activating Hidden City off of Metaverse, you will lose out on the search. So generally, unless you desperately need to negate an attack, you'll just be adding it to your hand off of Metaverse, but in most cases, it's better saved for either a Mystic Mine or in some instances, Necro Valley. Next up, we're playing 3 copies of Subterror Final Battle. This is the Swiss Army knife of this deck. So, on activation, you declare one of 4 separate effects. Effect 1 changes a Subterror from face down to face up attack or defense position. Again, like Hidden City, this is not a summon, just a position change. Effect 2 is the inverse of Effect 1. Put a face up Subterror face down. A fun note on these, if you're ever in a mirror match or if your monster gets taken from you, you can actually use this to affect monsters on either side of the field, nor does it target, for what that's worth as well. Effect 3 changes the value of a Subterror monster's attack to the combined value of its original attack and defense, and vice versa. 2 important things to know about this. 1, it overrides any previous boost on your monster, since it's changing a value, not stacking on additional attack. And second, you can use this specific effect in the damage step, but only this one. The last effect is to make the effects of face-up Subterror cards, again, cards, not just monsters, be unable to be negated for the turn. A few notes on this last effect. First, since Necro Valley actively negates effects that would move a card out of the graveyard, this is how we can play around our own Necro Valley. Secondly, your opponent can still negate activations of your Subterror effects. So, for example, while this would allow you to activate effects through a skill drain, or an Imperm or an Ash Blossom, since these all just negate the effect, something like a Cyber Dragon Infinity, which full-on stops the activation, this effect won't protect against that. The kicker to this card is that it isn't once per turn, so if you have multiple copies, you can use them on the same turn, and it resets itself for the next turn on its resolution. You can also use this card to turn Guru into a quick effect for the duration of the chain, since upon activating it for the rest of that chain, you now have a face-up Subterror card. Some lists only play 2 of this card. I personally like to use 3 because it's something I do like to see in my opening hand, and it's one less thing I need to search off of Guru, plus I can always side one out when I need to. But I wouldn't ever really go below 2 of this, it's just there's way too much utility in this card. We're going to follow that up with the beginning of our negation lineup with triple infinite impermanence. Again, not really much more to say about this besides just to make sure you make the most of your column placement when you use this if you're activating it from the field. That column spell trap negate can really come in clutch, especially against decks like Pendulum, or if your opponent just isn't paying attention where they activate their spells and traps. After that, we've got triple copies of Solemn Strike. So I like the main deck Solemn Strike over a main deck Solemn Judgment because going second, if your opponent already has a board built up, Judgment doesn't really do that much anymore, but at least with Solemn Strike, you can dig in turn 1 and start to pick at their board when they try to activate their negation effects. Obviously, going first, you can stop a Needle Fiber, you can stop a Link Cross, anything like that really just has very good first and second turn utility. Rounding out our main deck, we have our Floodgate triple copies of There Can Be Only One. This card stops a lot of other decks dead while really not doing much of anything to your deck because your 4 Subterror names are all separate types. Most of the big decks out there require at least 2 of the same monster type on the field at the same time to really start doing anything, and obviously There Can Be Only One prevents that. Many of them now have to divert their plays in order to get There Can Be Only One off the field, meaning that your negations are now free to protect There Can Be Only One instead of stopping them from comboing off. This card also has some fun synergy with Ciphering Gear Gamma, since Ciphering Gear Gamma's effect to summon itself and Driver happens simultaneously. It can resolve under There Can Be Only One, and you're just forced to send one of them immediately to the graveyard, letting you put Driver into the grave for future use, since it will now no longer banish itself with Gamma at the end of the turn. It does conflict a little bit with part of our extra deck, but the pros of this card heavily outweigh the cons. So moving on to the extra deck. You can kind of almost do whatever you want here. I'll show you what I'm playing and why, but beyond the few cards that I strongly suggest, you can really do whatever you want with this, as this will generally just be food for your extras. First up, I play 2 copies of Ciphering Lord Lambda. Now this does conflict with There Can Be Only One, but it also turns your Ciphering Gammas on even if you have a board set up. Generally, go into this if you Gamma turn 1 and have a second Gamma in hand. Following that up, we also play Ciphering Lord Omega. This is one of the 2 level 8 synchros we play that are solid options to use if you get to resolve your Gamma first turn. Use your best judgment between this and your other level 8 depending on the match. Next up we play 2 Link 1s, Link Karibo and Relinquished Anima. Just nice to have in case you need them. Relinquished Anima especially can be very punishing if your opponent isn't paying attention to their monster placement. Findus can make both of these. In all honesty, you could cut these if you want to go a different direction with your extra deck, or you can cut the Link Karibo for a second Anima just for better odds of it surviving an extra Ev. Next we have our other level 8 synchro, Draco, Berserker of the Tenyi. So this card is essentially a walking ghost order that banishes instead of destroys, and it's very useful in a lot of matchups, and gives you a very big beat stick if you get to resolve a Gamma. That's really it for what I think you need in your extra deck. The rest is kind of up for debate depending on your local meta, but I'm playing around a lot of Zaborg the Mega Monarch and people who are prepared for Dragma, so let's get into it with triple copies of Elder Entity Nitz. So when Nitz is sent from the extra deck to the grave, you can target a card on the field and pop it. Dragma, for those who don't know, play a monster that allows your opponent to send 2 cards from their extra deck to the graveyard to force you to send 2 cards from your extra deck to the graveyard. Nist is a great option here alongside our second tech for this being 2 copies of Cyber Dragon Nova. Now Nova, when sent from the grave by an opponent's card effect, allows you to special summon 1 machine fusion monster from your extra deck, and we're playing 2 copies of Invoked Mechaba just for that reason. Now it's important to note that if this happens on your opponent's turn, your Mechaba comes in safe from their Nitz if they choose to send that to the graveyard for their Dragma cost, since your opponent has to decide if they are activating their effects first. So they will have to declare their Nitz targets before Mechaba exists on the field, even though your Nova will resolve first. You also want to set up your chain with Nova first, then your Nitz to chain block and protect Nova's effects, since that's the more impactful of the 2. Closing out our extra deck are our 2 Waking the Dragon targets, Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon, just a massive boy that's unaffected by card effects, and Last Warrior from Another Planet, who, on entry, wipes monsters off the field and locks both players out of summons. So it's important to note you can still set under Last Warrior, and as I've mentioned, neither Hidden City nor Final Battle's effects to flip face up count as summons, so this allows you to play around Last Warrior very easily with this deck. Going to the side, I play a pretty basic side deck, so this can be altered as per your local meta or what you're seeing most often. We're going to open up with triple copies of Nibiru. We're going to follow that up with triple copies of Cosmic Cyclone. After that, we have triple copies of Solemn Judgment. If you know you're going first, it's good to add these in depending on the matchup, and if you really need those additional spell and trap negates, this helps out a lot. Next up, we have triple evenly matched. Again, standard going second stuff. Ideally, you can bait out any negates, then drop this if you didn't draw into your Nibirus to stop a full combo. Then we have double Waking the Dragons. Even if you banish your 2 specific targets off of an extra for this, Draco Berserker or Mechaba are both nice targets that can help pull out a win as well. If you only want to play one of this, you could cut it out, and I would suggest adding in an Effect Veiler, since you can build out the whole Needle Fiber, Selene Queen, Access Code Talker with this deck pretty easily. Findus is both a special summoner and a spellcaster, so she synergizes with that combo, but generally, if you can already pull that off, you've kind of won the game at this point. Lastly, we have 1 copy of Imperial Order. So this deck likes to be able to use its spells, but it doesn't necessarily need to as badly as some other decks do, so having this is a great option against things like Sky Striker or very fusion-heavy decks that require a lot of spell work. So that's going to close out my Guru Control deck profile. Again, this is a deck that wants to go first and set up 2 to 4 interruptions via either negates or your Book of Moon effect, and just keep the game state a very simple, very slow state at all times. This deck excels in the long game and can pick apart very strong boards over time if given the chance. The biggest key to playing this deck well is knowing other decks' choke points so you can use your interruptions most impactfully. And that's going to be it for my profile. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe to JC's channel, and I just want to thank him again for letting me profile my favorite deck of all time, Guru Control. Keasbey, out.